this is a brainstorming session on the issue of internet governance in Africa. Today, we have the Honorable Minister, Mr. Kondwani Nonkoma, the Minister of Information, Tourism and Culture of Republic Malawi, who are going to chair our meeting. The session will focus in 4 issues. The first issue is we are going to have a background information from Mr. Pierre Danginou, Vice President ICANN for Africa, about the IANA transition. After his presentation, Mr. Kofi going to make a presentation on the .Africa. And Mr. Pierre Wedrago or Mr. Ajal going to make presentation on the Net Mundial. Titi is there, but I think Titi can tell something about the African IGF, but she was chairing the organizing committee. Could you come on the table, please? You come on time, eh?
No, I have another plan as well. I'll have to leave it.
Okay. Okay, after the speech, yours. Give the floor to the Honorable Minister to start our session. You have the floor, Honorable Minister.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning. Let me, in the first place, welcome you all to this session where we are focusing much on the future of Internet and perspective for Africa. My role is just to coordinate the discussion. I will shortly be handing over to a few officials here to proceed. But let me, in the first place, register my profound gratitude to the organizers of this session for appointing me to chair this session. This is a great honor, not only to me, but also to my delegation and the people of the Republic of Malawi. So we thank you most sincerely for that. Just an overview on what Malawi has done so far in as far as IGF is concerned. Malawi joined the 2 countries in SADC region as the 3rd country to launch the IGF. IGF Malawi was launched on 23rd July 2014 at Sunbed Lilongwe Hotel in the capital city of Malawi. The activity started with a consultative meeting on 22nd July 2014, and at the same venue with the presentations from the academia, private sector, and of course, NEPAD Secretariat. The function was graced and sponsored by NEPAD and Malawi government through the Department of E-Government, which acts as a secretariat for the National ICT Working Group. The activity attracted participants from government, the academia, the civil society, private sector, and users of ICT. The overall objective of the Malawi Internet Governance Forum, Malawi IGF, is to establish a multi-sectoral process that will shape the development of Malawi's internet economy. We have specific objectives, which as follows: to increase the awareness and build capacity on internet governance issues amongst stakeholders in Malawi, to facilitate the participation of a broad range of Malawi stakeholders in regional and global internet governance, and of course identifying emerging issues and bring them to the attention of the relevant bodies, and to shape and inform the national policy and governance mechanisms. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, back to this session, as I've already alluded to the fact that I have a good number of people who would be talking on specific issues. Let me therefore, without much ado, hand over to Ms. Titi Google to tell us more about IFIGA 2014. Thank you.
Thank you. Name is Titi Akinsami. The AIGF held in Abuja, Nigeria. I think it was the third AIGF. So far, it's been billed as the best. Again, it gets better. I think of importance to note is there were about plus or minus 41 countries represented, which is a good set of numbers. And I believe all those countries were actually from the continent. Outside of the continent, we had about 7 other countries that were represented. In total, I think there were plus or minus about 600 people. Just correct me if I'm wrong. From 41 countries, 600 people from 41 countries. There was really engaging conversation. One of the takeaways I had was to be a bit more, we need to tighten the planning of our content a bit more. Very clear recommendations were made, one of them including the fact that certainly our strategy should be built around not just having an event, but actually having specific activities that connects and being able to take that away with us to be able to implement. And I know that at least in my capacity as the policy lead for Google, we are in conversations with the AUC, AUNEPAD, also with civil society, APC, and other players to see how we can best take that forward. Second thing was to review the structure of how we currently have the IGFs on the continent. Currently, we have a lot of national IGFs, then we have the sub-regional, and then we have the African one. But at times, more often than not, I know, for example, that the Southern African IGF has not taken place yet. The West African IGF has not taken place yet, again, because of the current situation in West Africa. Southern African IGF will only be taking place at the end of this month, in Malawi, by the way, hosted by SADC. So those are some of the things that we need to be able to review. One of the other recommendations was for there to be a tighter coordination body of some sort that would be responsible for ensuring that not just content, but that there's actually continuity between the IGFs as well. I believe there was some capacity building that was done ahead of the AIGF itself. One of the useful things that also happened, I think 4 pre-events in total, but it was also connected to a training that had been done or that was already in place ahead the week before with, I think, on DNSSEC, co-organized by, I believe, ICANN, and I believe Monsieur Pierre will be able to speak a bit more about it. But I think one of the recommendations I have been touting a lot through this meeting is our capability to be able to connect the dots across various events and activities that speak to internet governance in general. I think that will give us a lot more sustainability. It would also ensure that we had the right players attending these meetings, but also then ensure that we are not seen as elitist and that the discourse actually matters beyond these circles. I hope I've done a good job. If there are any questions, feel free to ask me. And I want to share my apologies again. I'm running from one session to get here, and I have another session starting at about 10:15, so I might have to get up and leave a bit earlier.
Thank you very much. Since you have a very busy schedule, I'd use this opportunity, therefore, to open the floor in case they have questions to you before you take leave. I open the floor. Thank you.
About your questions, I'll come back to you. I just realized that actually one of the critical things that we identified, this is a personal pet, I can't call it a pet project, but a personal concern of mine, the fact that we need to build our own capacity so we can better understand our issues and be able to articulate it. And as part of that, what we're currently doing with the African Union NEPED agency in partnership with Diplo is 3 schools on internet governance in Africa. For that school, sometimes we think, oh, internet governance is a very focused, very specialized conversation. And we plan to have 35 people in one class. We just plan to have one class because we felt, applications might not be that many. Nobody knows what internet governance is. Interestingly, there were 600 applications. Now, I've been in these conversations for about 14 years. I know it's very small compared to Monsieur Pierre on the extreme, who's probably been around for about 25 years in the conversations. But of the 600 applications, I was very happy to see that they were not applications from people who already knew a lot about the conversations. Those were probably 5% of the total 100%. So of 600 people, a majority of them were people who were sitting in key positions that would influence whatever discussions we had, who were applying to know more about it. So that for me was exciting. So we ended up with 3 cohorts or 3 classes, 2 in English and 1 in French. And we're hoping that we can actually continue this. So we need to spread the word towards the opening of the applications next year. Oh, and then the face-to-face African School on Internet Governance will be happening sometime later this year, in all likelihood in November. I believe APC has sent out the call for applications. I think that should also, we should help spread the word on that. Chimsen.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Just a comment and a quick question. First and foremost, I would like to appreciate UNECA for the initiative for the AIGF. It's really wonderful with regard to how you have consistently coordinated African IGF the past 3 years. I observed that there were some issues, though we can always improve, especially with private sector participation at the very beginning. So I think there was a gap in that, and because at the last minute, we had to try to rally around private sector people. So I want to say, can we positively improve on that going ahead or going forward for the next IGF? Because the next frontier is strengthening national and regional IGF in the discussion or the mandate of IGF going forward. Can we actually do that, make it more inclusive, even at the prep stage, and even during and post-review? Thank you.
Directed at the secretariat than at me. But if I just remove the chair's hat as the AFIGF, the last AFIGF chair hat, and wear a business hat, I would say I very much agree with your position. I think we had tried to initiate some conversations about engaging African private sector a lot more. And I hope it's something that we can actually develop a strategy on, and I'd be happy to join you in that conversation and see how the secretariat, now that it's sitting with the African Union, get a lot more people pulled in.
Sure, I think on this one, UNECA has a presentation, and that issue will be tackled as they will be presenting that document. Thank you. UNECA on the floor. Yes.
Okay. My name is Sintra Suknanan. I'm from the Caribbean, but I have a question for Titi. Being a woman in this field, how do you find that the African IGF reaches out to women in ICT and builds on women empowerment and our specific issues?
Without having the direct data in my hands, I know it's one of our priority issues going forward. I had the opportunity to participate on the Gender Dynamic Coalition on gender on Tuesday morning. And one of the things we have agreed going forward is to actually actively engage women in general a lot more. It's not that that has not been happening, but again, it's about being able to, it's about taking the stage. So there are women who are well equipped to be able to take the stage, to be able to lead conversations, but it's about understanding how we can better enable them to be at the forefront of the conversations. I'm also very careful to find the balance between, because I know that at a point I got very disenchanted with being a statistic, female, black, young, African, I fit the plug, but rather to engage with women based on this and not just on a gender basis. So I think if we can enable women a lot more, we'll have the capacity to do much better, both on the regional and on the African stage. I know there's a proposal on the table that Olga Cavalli and myself are talking about, the possibility to maybe have a school on internet governance specific to women. We'll see where that goes. At least that will be one of many more initiatives.
Thank you very much. Any takers on the floor before we? Thank you.
My name is John Dada from Fansom Foundation, Nigeria. I was privileged to attend the African IGF in Abuja, and I remember one of the thorny issues that kept coming up was the issue of funding for participants. It seems to have been a perennial or an annual challenge, because virtually the same purse from which support has been accessed in the past is the same place we keep going. And there was concern of how do we make this more sustainable? Will it be, could it be that we should scale down the sub-regional events and just concentrate on the national and the regional? But I think people are challenged to think outside of the box and look at how do we begin to look at how to fund this and make it more sustainable.
So I see that it's going to be addressed in the presentation, but I also wanted to be able to put this on the table, because I won't be around probably won't be around when you'll be having that conversation, is the challenge of replication. There's so many events that touch on these issues that sometimes, I'm not asking us to cancel anything out, but we need to be able to connect the dots a lot more. And one of the proposals that I have been chatting with people about this past week, and I mean civil society, government, other players, is on our continent, for example, we now have something called the Africa Internet Summit that has the technical community present, that has business present, that has, to some extent, government present. Then we need to be able to identify how we can piggyback or coordinate or collaborate to have the African IGF also at that event. For me as a funder, it makes good business sense, it made good financial sense, and it also means we can actually have a connected conversation as opposed to disconnects that happen. It also means I have a bit more time on my calendar to do other things that I like doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Titi, and you made, okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's proceed. Now, after all is said and done, the question is, how far have we gone with the INA transition? With this, let me therefore hand over to my colleague, Pierre, to give us highlights on this one. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, and good morning to everyone. I'm actually going through a kind of dilemma here, because I also have actually a panel supposed to be there by 9:30, but of course we had to give way for the lady, so she left, but it's okay, I will try to cope with it. And I also did have questions, pertaining to how we best organize, the African IGFs. I will just throw them in, but I might not be around for more than maybe 15 or 20 minutes as of now. But basically, in terms of the IANA, well, what we call the transition, I would like to say that right now we do have the main session, the main meeting room. We do have a session which is starting at 9:30, which is exactly about this IANA transition. It's going to be a very comprehensive one, and that you have all the information there. But what I would like to do quickly is to maybe go through the kind of provide the background for all of this, kind of status report, where we sit now, and where we are heading briefly. Of course, I presume we all understand, what the IANA, is doing, and it's functioning, and its linkages with ICANN. I'm not going to dwell on that, but suffice to understand that the issue at stake here, when we talk about the transition of this stewardship of the NTIA on IANA function, when we say this, I think it's about securing an engagement of the wider community, including governments, in the multi-stakeholder dialogue process. So what the NTIA was requesting on the 14th of March in its announcement, that it's actually prepared to release its stewardship. What they're asking for is to hand it over to a certain mechanism that will show some its openness, inclusiveness, and that ultimately will be about strengthening the governance of those functions. And those functions are quite simple, and they are also key to the internet, actually. You all know that IANA is the one that manages the DNS, but they also manage the numbers, IP addresses, the root system. So what is the core of the internet is what they do manage. So when you mean internet, that's exactly what we are talking about, the kind of three sort of, functions. And those functions normally was contracted to ICANN. And of course, ICANN subcontract those to IANA. This is something we should understand. Now, so in the announcement of the NTIA, ICANN was charged with facilitating a global dialogue that will result in the proposal for the transition. So we have to bear in mind, the US government is looking for what we might call a proposal to really provide this, to transfer this stewardship. So the process was started in, during ICANN 49 meeting in Singapore. And basically, the process was the following. Of course, there was a period where we requested comments online. Comments came on this announcement. And what is quite interesting is that it was heavily positive. I mean, people really, of course, like this. But also, now we also need to get down to job, because what the U.S. government was saying is quite clear. But there are some conditions, to what they are requesting from us. So ICANN certainly supposed to report back. So what they've done so far is quite simple. There is a repository where you can get more information on that. There's no, I don't want to get into that one. But the process involved, global stakeholders, discussions, and I think the most important thing to note today is that we are the kind of juncture where we are able to establish what you call the IANA Stewardship Transition Coordination Group, which is ICG. You'll be hearing more about this ICG. It's quite important. The ICG is going now to be in charge of this. And by the way, yesterday, I think the ICG issued a request for proposal to select a suitable contractor to perform its secretarial function, which means that this ICG is going to be the one that will produce, that proposal that will be submitted to the U.S. government. Now, maybe, of course, I don't want also to get into detail because you might also want to know who are the members of this ICG and are there any African there? Yes, but they are on the website here. Maybe briefly what I will do is also to maybe see what's the way forward and why Africa should be interested in that. Of course, the way forward is in terms of timeline for this. Normally, the IANA contract, or I mean the ICANN contract with the U.S. Will be terminating as of September 2015. And ideally, people will think that that could be the deadline for submission. But at the same time, the U.S. government is saying that, well, it's giving as much time as we would like for that. So bear in mind that this can be a whole year sort of process. The other thing that this declaration is triggering today is that it's also questioning some issues within ICANN, which is the accountability of ICANN. So that's why we cannot separate both processes now, and that's why ICANN has engaged now into heavy debates on its own accountability. Now, why Africa should be part of the whole debate, I mean, it's quite obvious. What the U.S. government is trying to do here is transferring, this stewardship to what they would like to be called a multi-stakeholder model. And also this is about policy development. It's about the core function of the internet. So, of course, Africa should be part of it. And being part of this is what exactly? It's about understanding the issues. It's about contributing to the solutions we might come forward with. But I would say also it's about us trying to be heavily involved, because normally we are not involved in those things, but now we do have an opportunity to do this. So I will really think that Africa should be heavily part of this. Efforts have been done, especially with Afrinic, that has established a discussion list on this process. But that was also certainly from the purely, I would say, perspective, polytechnical perspective. I would suggest that African IG think also about this. How do we have a repository or resource center on this process? Might be an interesting thing. And then quickly, Mr. Chair, I think talking, and I will finish with that, talking about the future of the internet governance, and when it comes to Africa, it's a good thing that we are clear about the secretariat that's organizing the African IGFs. But I think that we still need to be aware of a few things and self-organize. For instance, how are we promoting the multi-stakeholder model at country level? I've been part of different African IGFs. I always see this as civil society struggling to kind of organize something. Well, of course, as Titi said, with the Nigerian one, the Abuja one, there was some progress, involvement of the government, which is good. I know that the Southern Africans one is going to be taking place in Malawi, and the heavy involvement of SADC, and I think which is quite good. So, Mr. Minister, I would really like, the decision makers to be really part of this process, and it has to be multi-stakeholdering. We need to understand the issues at stake, which means we need to get prepared before we even come to these global meetings, either ICANN or IGF. We need to really be prepared. Now, I want to touch upon an issue, which is financing those things. I would like to do this because partly ICANN is those who try to sponsor those things. But we also need to be sustainable, and there was a question up there. We need to heavily think about how we do sustain this. And for me, the best way of doing this is through inclusiveness. How are we including the business sector? I always say, go where the money is. and the business sector, when you do have the appropriate, explanation, they might follow suit. Of course, and that was and then I'm so grateful that Titi suggested this. That was exactly my suggestion, that we make sure that we link the African IGF with the African Internet Summit. The Africa Internet Summit, we crafted this as a kind of framework or platform for all sort of internet, activities in Africa. And this, we are not actually reinventing the wheel. This already exists in Asia. In Asia, for the whole week, they do have this sort of gathering around internet. And it's about talking about technical issues, but also policy issues, research and development, the business, the industry, all of them in a whole week, and they talk about it. I would like us to really link this, to Africa Internet Summit, which also happens every year. That will also best, will piggyback on this event, and that also help us, solve the issue of funding some parts. So I would like us to really consider that one. So, Minister, thank you very much for your attention, but that's quickly what I wanted to share, and ready for a few questions before I leave. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that an elaborate presentation. Let me also open the floor, because he has some other things to do. He has some other plenaries to attend. Any takers on the floor in as far as his presentation is concerned? Yes, Madam.
Issues. Thank you. My name is Mary Uduma. I'm from Nigeria. We hosted the 2014 AIGF. And I was also in Djibouti. And I like the idea of linking the AIGF with AIS, since Africans do gather there. But I want to make a comment on our inability to contribute in the debate. We should be interested in the IANA transition, or the stewardship transition, because it's a question of somebody that has been supervising a process is saying, look, I want to give up a process, and I want a proper institution to be able to do what I was doing. All right. So I want to say that I am a member of I am a member of the ICG with ADL. ADL is representing the number community, while I represent AFTL, the domain name community, or the naming community. And through I got there through the CCNSO. But I've found out that I've been trying to communicate with our CCs in our region. They are not responding to the communication. First, the RFP for secretariat, anybody can apply. If you know that you can do the job, you can apply to be the secretariat for the ICG. So it's open. Anybody can apply. That's one. Secondly, is that the RFP for contribution, the ICG is just a coordination. It's just the work is done in the community. The CCs in Africa should come up with their own proposal, what they think should be the right institution to do what NTIA was doing. NTIA is saying, I'm no more going to supervise. And the sovereignty issue here, all CCs are, they have the sovereignty undertone. That is the critical internet resource of every country. And in some of our countries in Africa, is the government that is in charge of CCs. So we need to come up and say, look, this is what we want. NTIA said there should be no government, there should be no multilateral. Is that what Africa think, or Africa thinks? Is that what we want? If we don't want that, we could also say, look, because of our own environment, we deal with government and all the rest of them. There could be a different model we can propose. But the coordination group is not going to do a proposal. They are only going to tie up all the proposals from the community, so the work must be done in the community. Let me stop there so that we can, other people can say. But I want to also say that the AIGF, we need the business people to be part of it. We are grateful to Google, but there are operators in Africa that are making a lot of money in Africa. If African government should write them to tell them to contribute to the AIGF, I think funding shouldn't be a problem in AIGF process. Please, Minister, maybe when you get back to AU, I like what happened yesterday, the publication between AU and ECA on the Secretariat of the... So if the Secretariat has moved to AU, then AU should be able to compel or should urge the countries to write to those that are making a lot of money within our environment to contribute to the financing of the AIGF. Thank you.
Thank you. That was good information from Pierre. Let me stand. It's just a comment too and a question. The comment is that one of the outputs we are seeing from this conversation IGF is that the multi-stakeholder approach is still the best way, for raising discussion on policy direction. Policy direction, maybe vis-a-vis CCTLD management, vis-a-vis even industry management, law enforcement, policy development, so on and so forth. So my question now is, how do we strengthen this multi-stakeholder approach in Africa? I'm from the private sector, and we know the effect of liberalization in our economy. It has helped our economic development. So I think our focus should be on that. And in default to the IANA transition, I think that should be what we should be concerned with. How do we leverage on the IANA requirement for a multi-stakeholder approach organization to also develop and strengthen our own inbound polity and organization? So we don't think government alone should handle it, and I think we've passed that stage, and we need to open up for other stakeholders. So how can we do that more? Pierre, thank you.
I think this is quite a good question, and I also don't think I do have all the answers for that. And but maybe quickly, I would think we need to demonstrate. I mean, when it comes to business sector, for instance, one of the things they will tell you is, what is in it for me? You go to whoever is there, making money, and GSM guys, they will say, but what is how is this going to increase my business? And that's maybe where we, working from civil society or technical component of the thing, should be able to explain those things to them. And there are also the regulators. And regulators in most of our countries, they have the means. And Mr. Minister, I really think that regulators, at least in Africa, they have a specific role to play, which is contribute to exposing Africans to the issues. And one way of doing this is to make sure that they are part of the multi-stakeholder model in the country and that they finance. I really insist on that, Mr. Minister. They have to finance, because they are having the licenses fees, but at the end of the day, who is paying for the licenses? It's the users. And their job is also to actually facilitate, the acquisition of the knowledge. And I think it's important that they be part of it. And now, as you said, government also has a role to play. We are getting something like 1%, I don't know, over the fees or whatever, from those operators. Well, why don't we give part of this money to organizing our own multi-stakeholder model in the country? These are definite, sort of political decision that we can make, so that they are part of this. I know they want to be part of those things, but of course, they want to know what is in it for them. And civil society, like I was telling yesterday, should stop preaching those things. We are always preaching to them that it's good, come. But no, you should demonstrate to them. So let's try to work on that, and we'll have them on board, because, come on, look at the situation here. And most of our meetings here, most people that are coming here are not sponsored. It's the business that is paying for them to come. It's only now a part of the world that we are talking about sponsorship every time. And I think we should continue anyway with that, but we should make sure that we are much more sustainable in the way we do those things. And the way to do it is that the business sector, the industry of Africa is still there. Minister, this is just what I wanted to share.
Thank you very much. You may take leave at your pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, please. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, let me therefore invite Mr. Kofi, who is an African liaison, to talk to us, to present something to do with Dot Africa. For us to achieve this, we need to go the Dot African way. But how far have we gone with this on the issue of Dot Africa? Over to you, Mr. Kofi.
Thanks, Honorable Minister, for giving me the floor. I will not burden you with all the historic details on Dot Africa. Suffice to say that it has been actually a very challenging process, which required your support, your continued support and engagement. At this stage, I wanted to update you about the recent action taken by ICANN regarding the Dot Africa application. Following the registry agreement we signed in Singapore between ICANN and ZDCR, my organization, endorsed by the African Union and all the African governments to operate technically on the continental top-level domain. What happened is another company called the DCA filed a request for independent review process regarding ICANN's decision to proceed for Dot Africa delegation. And as part of the IRP, DCA requested an emergency stay on all further activities on any application for Dot Africa until the IRP panel issued its final decision on the IRP case. So in fact, the IRP has issued a decision that ICANN should hold off from further processing of all activities pertaining to my organization, ZDCR's application for the Dot Africa top-level domain for the time being, in order to allow the panel time to consider arguments from DCA and ICANN on DCA's claim regarding the Dot Africa top-level domain. And according to ICANN, pursuant to the IRP panel's decision effective immediately, ICANN will cease all proceeding activities pertaining to ZDCR's application for the Dot Africa top-level domain pending resolution of the IRP. So recently in London, among other activities, the GAC advises the ICANN board to provide timely communication to ZDCR, in particular to provide clarity on the process and possibly timelines. From our side as a registry, we don't know when the final decision is due, because the IRP panel has not communicated a timeline for the consideration, activities and decision. And in order to update our relevant stakeholders, and especially the African communities, the African governments, Malawi, and all those governments in Africa who have always provided the support for the operation for Africa, it's quite critical and critically even important that we receive clarity on the way forward, including proposed dates for the conclusion of the IRP. Unfortunately, Mr. Dongino, Vice President for Africa, is no longer here with us. He left for another panel. Otherwise, I think from ICANN perspective, he could also update us on the way forward, because till today, my organization have no idea about the way forward, even the proposed date. So we have already launched 3 CTTLDs, .joburg, .london, .joburg, Cape Town, and .durban. And we're still waiting to launch .africa since May 2014. And what we are trying to do in the interim is to try to gauge and manage the impact of this delay on our preparation, and also to launch the TLD and the subsequent expectations that have been created in the market following the registry agreement we signed in Singapore since March. So what we want from ICANN is to understand the broader parameters to which we are now bound. And as we hear with the African stakeholders, the African community, I really need from your side action. Because on our side, it's between ICANN and DCA. We can't do anything. Our hands are very tight. So we really need from your side action on the way forward in order to secure a quick launch of .Africa. Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much for that presentation again. Would I therefore open the floor for a discussion on his presentation? Any takers on the floor? Yes.
Thank you, Kofi, for that. Honorable Minister, thank you for the excellent coordination. I'm really concerned about the delay in the .Africa, implementation, and because I know the image implication, and I know the rich implication in terms of projecting our cultural heritage and entrenching our diversity, because that is the focus anyway, the brand, the .Africa brand. But at the same time, we are law-abiding and we follow the rule of law. So we too are stakeholders, because in AFICTA, in fact, we were making an initiative to register, and that was when we also got to know that there was a problem, and so we're not happy about it. And with regard to what we can do, we too at a loss. We are also looking at, say, following the process. So we also need to have more briefing from you about what we could do, because we are stakeholders. We want to project Africa, and there are many plans to have for .Africa as users. So we will appreciate your feedbacks, and to also get information about timelines so that we could plan properly. So information is very key. We need to get information across and through the network, and we need to create that database or serve list, to get us informed about the matter. But the bottom line is the rule has to be followed, and is very important that we are sensitized concerning what is happening in that respect. But the prospect and the future of Africa is secured, is non-negotiable. That is our brand. And if it requires some amount of waiting, we'll wait, but we want quick resolution as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I agree, because it's a matter of information sharing. if we choose or when we choose to sit on information, because both sides need to exchange information, we need to find appropriate ways and means whereby that critical information can be shared, and it is only by doing that we can forge ahead. But no information sharing, we won't proceed. Any takers on the floor? Questions, comments before I close this? Otherwise, thank you very much, Kofi, for this presentation. It has been noted, and I believe from now onwards, there's going to be some change in as far as information sharing, as per your concern, is there. Ladies and gentlemen, let me proceed this way, in that I call upon Mr. Pierre, who is a director at the International Organization of French-speaking countries. He has a presentation as well on NetMundo. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Mr. Pierre. I thank you.
Good morning. I hope you all have your headset, so I can speak in French. It will be more clear for you. If not, you have everything that appears on the screen. Je dois donc parler de l'initiative Net Mondial. Comme vous le savez, c'est une initiative, enfin, du moins l'origine, c'est la présidente du Brésil, Madame Dilma Rousseff, qui, au cours de l'Assemblée générale de l'ONU l'année dernière, is it going on or not? Huh? No translation. Okay. I have to do it in very bad English. Huh? No. We are going to lose time. Okay. Sorry for the translation that did not work. I was mentioning that the Net Mondial idea comes from President Dilma Rousseff of Brazil, who have announced that at the meeting of the United Nations General Assembly last year, and has called for a meeting in Sao Paulo this year. This meeting has adopted the principle known as Net Mondial principle. But as you know, sometimes when you have those big meetings, you have nice paper, but no action, no implementation. It comes to the idea of Mr. Fadi Shiade and some others with the World Economic Forum to set up an initiative to help to implement the principle. And that's what happened on August 28 in Geneva at the World Economic Forum site. As you know, the WEF, this is the abbreviation for World Economic Forum, is a neutral place where the decision makers of all the world meet every year to discuss the matters that relate to the future, the perspectives, and everything. And so for the next meeting scheduled in January at Davos, Davos is the place where the WEF organize the meetings. We are going to talk about the Net Mondial principle and how to implement it. But for this first meeting of the launch of the initiative, there have been a couple of exchanges on the policies, the policy sector between many high-level people that were. It was chaired by the president of Estonia himself, and beside Mr. Fadishiade, you had also the ITU Secretary, the ITU Secretary General, Mr. Amadou Touré, who was there, and they had exchange on the policy aspect. I will not go deeply in that because this is politics, but for the operational parts, we had the presentation of 4 projects, and the discussion are undergoing till the meeting of Davos in January to see how those projects can be implemented. We have a study that will be conducted by the Beckman Center on Internet governance model and others. But I think the 2 projects I wanted to mention especially here are the one presented by Brazil and the other one by ICANN. Brazil has proposed to have a project on best practices. This means that this project will help to disseminate the success stories in the multi-stakeholder model, like with CGI-BR or the initiative in Lebanon, and so people can organize their own national internet ecosystem on the multi-stakeholder model. I think that you are all aware of Brazilian model, as the minister himself has presented it at the high level and at the opening ceremony. And the ICANN is also planning to build a toolkit for internet governance. Why I wanted to speak of that with you here is that I think that this could be a good opportunity for Africa. We are always late sometime, and here we have the opportunity to be on time with the rest of the world and use the successes that have been reached in Brazil, in Lebanon, in other countries, to build our own national internet ecosystem. Because if we don't have the national ecosystem built, we are the losers in the information society. Because even for participation, when you go outside, to who are you going to report when you are back in the country? You report to yourself sometime or to your organization, but not to the country. But if you are organized, you can report and make the country benefit of what you have learned, what you had the opportunity to see outside. And I think this is a key issue because, as you know, the winners are always those ones who are the most organized. Because human being or organization by themselves cannot succeed. But if they put their intelligence together, their efforts together, they may overcome difficulties. And this is the lesson I learned from Geneva, and I wanted to share with you and tell you that every one of you should be national ambassadors to help build the national internet ecosystem. On the Francophonie side, we are working hard now on the program for the years 2015-2018, and we have a project named National Internet Ecosystem. And we are going to work on that with you, of course, in the Francophone countries, but we are still open to share best practice with the other countries. So let's do what I call the homeworks, build first in our country, and so we will be strong at the global level. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that presentation in good English, of course, because well, you were
I
not
hope
sure.
you understood everything.
Yeah, sure.
If not, I can translate it in Arabic.
Thank you very much. Let me again open the floor for comments and questions.
Thank you very much, Pe. That was an excellent recap of NetMundia. I had the privilege to be on the high-level committee of NetMundia, and I can also, from my direct experience, also add to what you said that indeed that was a classical example of multi-stakeholder approach, you know, to discussing national, regional, and global issues. And not just multi-stakeholder, but also bottom-up. Not just top-down, but bottom-up. You know, wherein from the basis, information was synthesized and collated, and it continued until got to the set of principles that we have and the roadmap. So it was a reflection on the model, and it's good. I want to add to what you said, your advisory to our national internet ecosystem. Because if you go out there, who do you report back to? Do you report back to yourself? So I was in a panel yesterday, and there was a classical example of how multi-stakeholder has been working to solve child sexual abuse issues, which is a very serious issue even for us in Nigeria. And it used to be a government-only approach. And that time, they had 20% of the abuse was around even in UK. But after many people were involved, many stakeholders, the private sector, the technical people, the consultation, the reports came that it went down to 6%. So there is a lot of value in us using the bottom-up multi-stakeholder approach. And for private sector, it is not true that private sector doesn't want to be involved. But at the same time, it's true that private sector will ask, what is in need for me? Because you have to consider return on investment. When you sow corn, you expect to harvest. So, but if it's not clear that the land is fertile and that there will be good rain, you're not going to plant the corn. Otherwise, it will be wasted. So the point then is that AU, UNECA, they need to also appreciate this and find a way to draw in those stakeholders that appears they are not participating. Because I also have an experience here right today that one of such telecom that people think, oh, they are not interested. Of course, by the gentle invitation, and there is great appreciation that, wow, this is what's going on. So people need to have understanding of what we are discussing. And it's in our region we really have the major gap. So I want to support your submission that we need to embrace the multi-stakeholder approach. We've seen the example in NetMundia, and it needs to be sustained. And actually, it's the government, Honorable Minister, it comes from the government. The government needs to take that initiative. After all, when this internet started, it was the government, USG, that created the initiative to empower the private sector, empower the civil society, empower all the other communities until they were able to mature and stand on their own. A time will come when you need to beg them to come. They will be there, just as we see internationally. So that is an important lesson I really want to plead that we get in our region. We need to encourage the sectors, private sector in particular. There's money there, there's no doubt. But before they put in the money, their eyes need to be opened. And we need to find a way to track that. Because I'm a business person. If I don't see the value, I won't spend money. But a tree can never make a forest. So we need more, because the discussion is across many spectra. Thank you very much.
Okay.
My name is Gabriel from South Africa. Actually, I've got two questions. One would be to the Honorable Minister and Mr. Piri. The first one, Minister, my question is, we have seen that in Africa, especially coming from South Africa, we organized the Gauteng Internet Governance Forum 2 months back in July. And all the stakeholders, they were there, civil society, business, and so forth. But one major stakeholder was not involved, it was the government. And it's not that we didn't go to them and discuss with them to take part within this IGF. We did, but there's some disagreements regarding that. So my question will be, the government mostly did not favor the multi-stakeholderism concept. They did not favor it. So what really works for them? Just to put it in more clarity, what is that the government will think will work for them if multi-stakeholderism doesn't work for them? I don't know whether my question is clear, but I'll revert back to it if it's not clear. Then the second question to Mr. Piri will be, ICANN, during the WF meeting, so you mentioned that they said they will develop a toolkit for internet governance. My question is, what that toolkit, or how will that toolkit be different from the current toolkit that we have around internet governance? Thank you.
Okay, thank you all for your reaction to the presentation. It is a short presentation because the discussions are undergoing. So it is important, if any input is very important at this stage, because before January we can shape everything, but after that it will be difficult. So what I would suggest, according to what you have just asked, is that we may try to set up a working group, maybe a small working group of all the people that are implied in the process of the net mondial at the high level. Because in Geneva, I was there with Adiel Aploga from Afrinic and Barak from AFTLD. We were 3 there from the African networks. And you were at the high level in Sao Paulo. So we can maybe have a small group that can give input to the World Economic Forum. As you know, Mr. Alan Marcus is here. You have seen him at the opening, and he's still here, and they are open. So we can use the links we have to try to have the African interest to be taken in account inside the ongoing work. As I said, if we are not organized, we are the loser. So it is time now to do that work and maybe have 5, 6 people. You know, I think that as Adiel and Barak were already at the initial meeting, we could have maybe 3-4 people to be added, so we have a group that follow and that make sure that the African interests are taken in account at every stage and every project. For the toolkit, it is done by ICANN, so I think that we shouldn't have to worry much, because Pierre Danjuno, the other Pierre who is sitting here, is the VP Africa, and Anne-Rachel Iné, who was Afrinic CEO, is now the VP for government engagement. So we have 2 key ambassadors that can watch and report to the community whenever it is necessary in the toolkit. Also at Francophonie level, we are working, we are in contact with ICANN on that subject. So we will keep update on the African list, I think. All the people, you are all on African list? African list. Who is not on the African list? And some people who are here can submit it on AFNOG, AFTLD, and UNECA to ASI and everything, you know. But we need to have that group to be organized. If not, we are by ourselves, and we will not succeed if we do that. But if we can, after this session here, write to WEF and tell them we have a group now that want to follow and so and so. It's going to be, I think, very good for Africa. And in every country, the delegation for Davos, if you have your head of state or prime minister or ministers or CEOs that are going to Davos, it is important that they have a briefing before they go, in order to make sure that if there is something related to Africa that is there, they are aware and they can react, defend, and explain. Because as you know, Davos is quite close, and sometimes you have a civil society that make some events, parallel events, because the cost is very high, because also they want the world leaders, and sometimes when you have the leaders, you don't have the people, you know, sometimes, you know. So this is a situation I want to put on the table, and Mr. President, I put that in your hands. Okay, thank you.
That's a very good idea. We can all agree, as my colleague here is saying, but going back to your question, a question to me, I think I don't want to beat my own drum. Let me hand over to Mr. Banda from the Malawi Communications Regulatory Authority to respond to that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I think the question which you are asking is government participation in the IGF meetings. Yeah, on that one, maybe I would say, I think it differs from country by country, mainly looking to the institution which has been mandated to spearhead the IGF within the country. I'll take an example in case of Malawi. We launched the IGF Malawi chapter, that was in July, and the institution which is mandated to spearhead those activities is the National ICT Working Group. And that institution was established by the ministry some time back to into other issues. So, and then the Department for E-Government is the secretariat for the whole issue. So we find that our structure is more of involving government. As such, I would say always government is there. Now, case of South Africa, I'm not sure how you are structured in terms of to run those activities. So that's why I was saying it goes maybe country by country in terms of the institution which has been mandated to spearhead those maybe IGF activities. Now, maybe on the regional level, you find that well, still government is pushing through SADC. Case we have the regional meeting that's in on 17 up to 19, of course, taking place in Malawi. Yeah, so maybe my answer will remain on that. Say, on national level, many see which institution is mandated to do those activities. That's very, very important. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Minister. Just to quickly add that the case story of Nigeria, in 2005, the president called all stakeholders. He called the private sector, civil society, even the regulator, and he said, all of you go and discuss and then tell me what you want to do and do it. So since 2005, they met and they now say they're going to set up an organization, register the organization and set up a board, and all of them managing it, and there is peace in the ecosystem in Nigeria. Before then, there was no peace. So I think it's a multi-stakeholder approach. It's stable and it's sustainable. So, and that is a model we've seen in Brazil and other places. And my question is, again, like, we see that the regional organization, they are not actively involved. So how can we get AU or UNECA to, is there any process to get a relationship or handshake between AU and the regional organization like ECOWAS? Because ECOWAS has not been so forthcoming, for example, in West Africa.
Mr. President, we have a proposal here for the African Net Mondial Working Group, but it could be completed. Adiel Akploga, as you know, is the African CEO and president of OneNet. You remember when all the I-Star, all the internet specialized organizations have been in meeting in Montevideo, Uruguay, and they had the declaration after the Snowden affair. And Mark Tarsek from UNECA, who is following this, Barack Otieno, who was at the initial meeting, and Rachel Ine from ICANN, Jimson from Nigeria, I think. Africa, from Africa.
He's African now. Africa Telecom. Yeah, it's okay.
Africa Telecom. Okay.
Africa City Alliance. Yeah. Okay.
And Mokhtar Yedali from African Union. Who is in the back? Yes. Mr. Yawo.
From Côte d'Ivoire.
Ah, okay.
Thank you. This is my first participation in this kind of forum inside the IGF and in the MAG. I would like to know if...
Très bien, je ne sais pas.
Je peux parler en français alors?
Oui, vous pouvez vous approcher et même parler en français.
Voilà, je voudrais savoir si vous avez un programme sur la Côte d'Ivoire bientôt. un programme d'implantation sur la Côte d'Ivoire. D'implantation de l'AIGF par exemple ou du MAG. Parce que nous sommes loin de ces structures. Pour l'instant, nous sommes venus en observateur.
So I can give it to you. Yeah. Okay, fine. Yes.
Thank you. My question would be on the recent African IGF. What I would like to know is there was an outcome document on that IGF, and if there was, what are the plans to implement it going forward from that outcome document, if there was an outcome document from the African IGF?
Let's thank Mr. Pierre for that presentation. I hand to him. Thank you very much. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, a journey of 1,000 kilometers would start with one step. And this step started in 2005. We had that step, the first step in 2005. And with me here is my colleague, Mactaria, from UNECA. For the African Union Commission to reach this far, it has not gone or traveled the journey alone. It has the wonderful partner who is UNECA, and we want to know from Mactaria on how far we have gone, how has been the journey like, the successes inside, the challenges inside, and of course the way forward. And Mactaria is also going to take the opportunity to address some of the issues you have asked or you have commented on when he will be briefing us on how far we have gone, on how the journey has been like. Over to you, Mactaria.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Now we have only 5 minutes before to close our session. I'm going quickly give a briefing overview of the issue of IGF. As you know, this process was launched in 2010 during the IGF in Nairobi. In Cairo, I think my colleague Makan Fai, who is there, was leading this issue, and we create this secretariat, this African Internet Governance Forum, in collaboration with African Union. The objective for this African IGF, it is a platform to discuss all issues related to the internet governance who may have interest for African country. Since 3 African IGF meetings were organized, one in 2011 in Cairo, the first one, the second one in 2012 in Nairobi, and the third one recently in last July in Abuja, Nigeria. What are the lessons learned from these 3 IGF? First, in terms of attendance, at the level of attendance for the 2 first one in Cairo and Nairobi, the participation of the government was very low. And I think the government has an important role to play to the issue of IGF, how to implement if IGF doesn't give a recommendation, but we can follow IGF, have some idea to use for the national policy. Yeah. Why the participation of the government is very important. To know at the mondial level the issue of IGF. What are the key issues for the African country? And I think the issue of the Net Mondial was a good initiative for the developing country, and it served as lesson for African country. Why in the last meeting of IGF, we try to involve more the African government, and it was a good result because we have around maybe more than 500 participants, 30% coming from the government. And the 30% are not supported by the African IGF Secretariat. They come themselves. The government funding their participation. I think it was a good starting point. And since 3 years we work together with African Union to handle this secretariat. Secretariat was hosted by ECA. And now I think what we discussed, we need to strengthen it, this African IGF. Why we are discussion with African Union Commission, and now the Secretariat is moved to the African Union Secretariat. But ECA going to work closely together with African Union to support African country. It's just administrative matter between ECA and African Union to make more efficient the Secretariat, and in order also to see how we can sustain. We have several ideas here. We have to combine the African IGF meeting with the Internet Summit. I think it is a good idea we can put on the table. We have also this ICT week organized by African Union, but the problem is ICT week is every 2 years. Yeah. Now, we are going to discuss with African Union to see if it is possible to organize this ICT week every year, or to combine the ICT week and the Internet Summit with the African IGF. It is one issue on the table. The other issue, it is funding. Funding is very important for us to make sustainable this African IGF. But generally, the meeting is funded by ECA and their partner, Google, ICANN, ISOC, Francophonie. But we need for African country to participate. I think African Union Commission is a more indicated action in order to get some fund from the government. I think about to look at what we did with African Telecommunication Union, ATU. ATU is funded by the African government under the regulatory. We can think about on the same exercise to try to get a fund from the government. Now the issue I want to discuss, open discussion of you to get your idea. We have some idea on to make sustainable this African IGF. The participation of the government, very important, funding by government, also to involve the private sector. If you have another idea on the table, I think we are happy to receive your proposal, and we'll discuss with African Union Commission to see what is the best way to make this IGF sustainable, and this IGF also can respond to the need of African country. Also, I think we need also some sanitation. When you look at this conference room today, how many African countries are there? I think you don't have more than 5 or 10 countries. Yeah. Very, very low when we want to discuss, when we come on this kind of meeting to discuss the issue the important issue like this Internet Governance Forum. But we talk about we are going to have 10 years next year. We are going to prepare the outcome of the Internet Governance Forum to present what has been done in Africa since 2005 in Brazil. Okay. All right. Okay. I think it's very important to sensitize all Africans to participate at this debate. And this African IGF issue is for all African, not only for the private sector, civil society, government. It's for all. And everybody has something to say to design this African IGF issue, and also to have a common position for all African, and we can present something in Brazil. I think my message is just to sensitize you, to try to work hard for today until the next IGF in Brazil, to get one common document, and we can present something in Brazil. Yeah. What present the position for African for the several key question related to the African IGF. If you have any question on any idea, we are happy to receive and to try to implement. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Unfortunately, time is not on our side. There's going to be another session in this room just very shortly. So you'll forgive me, I'm not opening up for the plenary, but suffice to say that I am hopeful, and I believe that whatever has been captured in this room will be put, in this session will be put into use. And of course, let me take this opportunity to thank the panelists here, my colleague, and all the other participants, the delegates, for your comments, for your questions, and for your presentations. As my colleague has rightly put it, let's start preparing for the Brazil, which is next year now, because time is now, because the most thing that is killing us is that is our approach to business. It's business as usual. When we leave this place, when we leave Istanbul, we'll forget about it, or then when we discover it's 1 or 2 months to the Brazil conference, we start running around, running up and down. But let's start preparing for the Brazil forum. When we go, we immediately go. We get back home. Without much ado, it's my pleasure to close this forum, and thank you very much for being a wonderful audience. I thank you.